Have you ever just felt that modern life, with its neat little boxes for work and home, public and private, is maybe missing something? Something a little more alive? Well, today we're diving into the work of the philosopher Walter Benjamin. He spent his life searching for an antidote to this exact feeling, a search that took him from the super-ordered streets of Berlin all the way to the glorious chaos of Southern Europe.
This quote right here really just nails it. Benjamin and his lover Ajalacis were writing about Naples, and they compared it to an African kraal. Now, colonists use that term with contempt, but for Benjamin, it was the highest possible praise. He was seeing a way of life where the boundaries we take for granted just dissolved, where the most private thing we have, our own existence, suddenly became a shared, collective thing.
So Benjamin's whole journey forces us to ask this really provocative question. What if that private, walled-off life we all seem to want isn't a safe harbor, but is actually a cage? Let's follow him and see what he found.
Okay, so to really get what Benjamin discovered, we first have to understand what he was running from. He felt completely trapped in what the sociologist Max Weber famously called the iron cage of capitalism.
And this right here, this is the world Benjamin was born into. A Northern European society that was absolutely obsessed with efficiency, order, and control. It was a world where every single part of life, from your job to your home, was neatly separated and locked down.
And you can see the contrast so clearly here. On the left, that's Benjamin's childhood in Berlin. We're talking wealthy, socially cleansed homes where the poor were so invisible he barely even knew they existed. Everything was a jealously guarded private zone. But on the right, that's what he was desperate for, a thrilling, messy, intermingled life. A place where class boundaries just seemed to melt away, offering a possible cure for that alienation he felt so deeply.
Benjamin put it so perfectly. He saw the classic middle-class home not as a sanctuary, but as a phantasmagoria. Basically, a beautiful illusion. It's like having a private box seat at the theater of the world, a fantasy space where you can feel connected to everything, but you're actually completely cut off from the reality just outside your front door.
By the mid-1920s, this wasn't just some abstract idea for him. It was a full-blown personal crisis. The rise of anti-Semitism was making his home country feel hostile. His academic career fell apart before it even started. And then, when his father died, he was left financially stranded. So he left. He wasn't just a tourist. He was a man desperate to find a whole new way to live and to think.
And his travels led him down to Southern Europe, where he stumbled upon a concept that would completely define his new vision for life: porosity.
So what on earth is porosity? Well, it's a term Benjamin and Lacies came up with in Naples. It's meant to describe a life where all those rigid northern divisions, between buildings and streets, private and public, work and play, they just dissolve. It's a thrilling, chaotic, beautiful intermingling of absolutely everything.
So what does that actually look like? Well, in Naples, Benjamin saw people setting up their kitchens and altars right on the street. He could literally feel the noise and energy of the street migrating into people's homes. Day and night, noise and peace, it all just bled together. He was totally shocked to see kids playing outside at 1 in the morning. He even argued that poverty, which he definitely didn't romanticize, created this kind of radiant freedom from all those stuffy middle-class rules.
I mean, for Benjamin, this wasn't just a different culture. It was like a living, breathing work of art. He saw Naples as this ongoing carnival, a real-world version of a utopian dream, where life itself was this big, communal performance. That whole idea of inwardness that the North was obsessed with was just almost unthinkable there.
And this life was intensely physical. Just listen to this description of how people communicate in Naples. It's a world of gestures, of touches, of real physical connection that's both practical and kind of erotically charged. As one scholar pointed out, when you read this, it's hard to tell if Benjamin is being given directions or being propositioned. And either way, he was totally captivated by it.
Okay, so from the vibrant, messy reality of Naples, Benjamin turned his focus to Paris, which was the birthplace of a very different kind of reality, the dream world of modern capitalism.
He zeroed in on the Parisian arcades. These were basically the first shopping malls built in the 19th century out of glass and iron. He saw them as the perfect symbol for capitalism. Why? Because they were enclosed spaces with no outside, just like a dream. They created this self-contained fantasy world of shopping and illusion, completely sealed off from the real city just beyond the glass.
So how did he even begin to analyze this dream world? Well, his method was pretty weird. He was like a philosophical rag picker. First, he'd study the trash of the past, outdated fashions, old ads, forgotten buildings. Second,
He believed our collective hopes, our secret utopian dreams were hidden inside all this junk. Third, he would create something he called a dialectical image. And finally, the whole point was to use that image to create a shock effect, to jolt us all awake from the dream of consumerism.
Okay, now I'm going to be honest, this idea of the dialectical image is famously difficult, even for people who study this stuff for a living. But the basic idea is that it's a sudden, shocking collision. Imagine taking an old, forgotten 19th century arcade and just smashing it together with a very modern desire for, say, true human connection. In that flash, that constellation, you suddenly see the trick. You see how capitalism promises utopia but delivers something totally different. It was his version of Marxist shock therapy for our brains.
And this whole critique of capitalism's empty promises plugged right into a huge debate happening among his intellectual circle, the Frankfurt School. You had Marx, who believed we find our dignity through creative work, but then you had others, like Horkheimer, who said that making work into this holy thing is just more capitalist propaganda. Marcuse even contrasted Prometheus, the hero of hard work, against Orpheus, the hero of pleasure and peace, basically asking, why does our dream of a better future have to be all about more toil?
At the end of the day, Benjamin saw consumer capitalism as a kind of modern hell. It traps us in this vicious cycle. It's constantly promising fulfillment through the new phone, the new clothes, the new whatever. But it's a total lie. It just leads to this endless, deeply unfulfilling repetition of wanting, getting, and then being disappointed.
And that brings us to the ultimate goal of his huge, unfinished book, The Arcades Project. It was a political project, but it was aimed directly at our consciousness. He wanted to shatter that phantasmagoria, to wake us up to the fact that the things we buy can never, ever deliver on the deep human dreams of happiness and belonging that they promise us they will.
So that was Benjamin's diagnosis of his own time. But it leads to a final and I think really urgent question for us today. Are we still trapped in that same dream world?
Just listen to this incredible description of Marseille from 1929. He doesn't describe some picturesque postcard. He describes a yellow-studded maw, a mouth stinking of oil and urine. And here's the kicker. He loved it. At a time when travel guides were telling all the respectable people to stay away from the world's wickedest port, Benjamin ran towards it, precisely because it was poor and dirty and a little dangerous.
And when you put the city Benjamin loved next to the city of today, well, the change is just staggering. The wickedest port became a European capital of culture. The loud, poor, sexy, dirty city is now famous for its designer hotels and luxury apartments. The yellow-studded maw has been replaced by a sweet-smelling, civilized tourist destination. The very porosity and raw life that he treasured has been sandblasted away for our comfort.
And that's where we have to end. Benjamin believed that in the messy, the imperfect, the forgotten corners of a city, you could find these flashes of the utopian, these sudden, real moments of connection and freedom. So the question is, in our clean, safe, and highly polished modern cities, have we designed those flashes right out of existence? Have we perfected the iron cage? That's the question Walter Benjamin leaves us wrestling with.